I don't know who I am. I know that I am me, but I don't know who quote unquote me is. It's a very confusing topic. But I did get this idea from Joe Bartolozzi, um, one of my favorite YouTubers, right? But I truly do agree with him, and I feel like the question of who am I, it's been bothering me for quite a while actually. Before he even put out that video, right? When I was, I think when I was like 13, maybe. Yeah, 13. I um I was dating my ex, as if you watch my last video, those of you who have, you know me, enough to know that I was dating one of my exes when I was 13. One thing that really kind of made her leave me was the fact that I told her one time that I don't know what it's like to feel love or to feel feelings like a normal human being. And I think I can now, the more I've thought about it, right? But I have a hard time describing these feelings, right? You can't describe love. And it is it's a very difficult topic, especially when you're talking about it to someone that you love, right? Because you don't know how you love or you don't know why you love. You just love. And you can't even describe that feeling. It's something beyond description, like I said in my previous video. But even then, right, it kind of made me ask more questions like, who am I? I don't know who I am. And I'm not saying like I don't know, what I do and how I think and everything like that. Like I understand how I work. I don't know who the quote unquote I is though. Because if I were to ask you who you are, uh there's multiple different things that you'd say. But one of the things that you might say is your name. And I always thought that was a stupid thing to say your name, right? Because obviously a name is just a word, an English word, or whatever language that you speak. It's just a word within your language that kind of gives you a deeper meaning, right? So, what I mean by the deeper meaning is whenever you have, a name, like my name is Fowlin, right? It's a very unique name in America, especially. Um, but I think that any other name wouldn't suit me, right? And I don't know why. I don't know who I am as a person to make me think that any other name wouldn't match me, right? If you have like a common biblical name, like the majority of people have nowadays, like if your name is Joshua or if your name is Ezekiel, right? That's a more rare one, but still pretty common, right? If you have one of those type of names that your parents gave you, it's mainly for the the reason of, you know, the Bible being as popular as it is, and Bible names, like biblical names being very popular. So if your name is like Joshua, Josh, Ezekiel, like I said, Samuel, like my dad's name is Samuel. Um, it's a very common name, right? And if I were to ask you what your name would be, if not your own current name, I can guarantee you most likely don't have an answer. And I've asked myself this so many times, and I've also asked myself the question, why is it so difficult to find a name beyond my own current name? Because we have a certain being that we are. And when I was younger, when I was dating my girlfriend at the time, I told her that I don't know who I am. Like, I remember I told her every single time I look in the mirror, I feel this sense of the fact that that isn't me, you know? Like, whenever I look in the mirror, I struggle to believe what I see is me. Because when I talk about Fowlin, right, by name, that guy he's just a guy. But he's different than the current version of me. The current version of me isn't Fowlin. It's someone else. And I don't know who that person is. I think what I said when I was younger was that I see myself as someone better than I currently am, right? If you are looking to improve your physical health or your mental health or whatever, that's good and that's great. And I think you should continue doing that and all. But you have to remember, as soon as you change, that's not you, right? So the fact that you would say, oh, I don't know, Joe, right? If your name's Joe, you would say that that's you, right? And if you were to look back at an old picture of yourself when you were like 4 or whatever, you would say, oh yeah, that's me when I was younger. That's not you though. That might have been the current embodiment, the current biological form of you when you were younger. Yes. But I believe that people are something beyond biological with what's the term? Biological containment, you know? We are trapped as like people within our own like bodies, and although yes, the body I own is mine because it's attached to me, that doesn't make my body me. That's not me. Right? When I look in the mirror and I see my face, multiple times a day, I'm like confused, especially it's less now. It's more it's more common when I don't look into the mirror a lot, right? But currently I look into the mirror every so often, right? And I realize that I look a lot different than, how I would originally think I would look, you know? And I don't know what that means. I truly don't know what that means. It's very complicated, and I'm going to try to explain this as thoroughly and as well as I can. But when I look at myself in the mirror, I struggle to believe that that is me. That I'm just some guy, you know? Like, I don't have a crazy, face. I don't have a crazy, uh, body or anything. Like, I exercise every once in a while and I keep my health up, and that's great for me. And I believe everyone should do that. But the problem with that is I forget that I'm just a guy. I'm nothing more, nothing less. I'm just a body. And when I look at my body, I'm not like this, like, I'm not insecure about my body. My body's fine. It's just a body. That's all I think about myself. But yet again, my body isn't me. And so I don't know what I would look like, or sound like, or be like if I was outside of my body. Because let's say you have a like an older person in your life and they eventually die to complications due to old age. If you were to look at their open casket and look at their face, you realize that they're gone, they're dead, right? Now if you believe in a religion like I do, right, it's um a little bit less severe of sadness, because consciously that there is going to be an afterlife and they're not completely dead. But for those of you who are atheist and you believe that there is no afterlife, at that point they're just a body. And then that begs the question, what made them a person? What made them them? You know? Like if we can separate ourselves from our body, there has to be something to have been separated. And I believe that that is a soul, but I don't know what the difference is between a soul and me, right? Maybe the soul is me. Maybe I'm trapped within my own body. Maybe I'm trapped within my own mind, right? I think there's multiple different parts of a human, not like limbs and all of that, but something like a soul, a mind, and a body. I think that's like the main three things. And when I was younger, before I was truly, truly religious, before I give it really any thought, when I was in the relationship with my girlfriend, I remember I had like this form of not psychosis, but like a form of thinking like, wow, I don't know who I am. You know, I'm just a guy. I'm nothing. I'm a body, right? I'm just a face. I'm a face to a name. And that's what I thought about myself for a long, long time. And I don't know how people live every day not thinking like, wow, I look weird. Like I am just a human being, you know. Obviously, we're all human beings. At least I would hope. Except for Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg is the only exception. But anyway, we're all human, right? At the end of the day. Basically, I don't know what that means. I haven't ever given it any thought within, any people I've talked to about it. I've always said, I don't know who I am. And that's not saying like I don't know what I want to be, who I want to be, or whatever, right? I'm just saying I don't know who I currently am this very second. Because if I'm always changing, I will truly never know who I am until I'm still. Not as in like dead type of still, where I cease to walk, or I cease to see, or I cease to do anything else with life because I am dead, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being separated from your body, like I said, like a soul. That's what makes a person a person. And I don't know what my soul is, what my soul looks like, what my soul acts like. I don't know who I am. I only know that I'm a conscious human being in a world where other people are also conscious. And it gives me a form of comfort knowing that other people are going through the same struggles as I am, trying to find themselves or trying to understand who they are, right? And I'm not talking about transgender people, right? A lot of transgender people will be like, oh, that's not me. I'm supposed to be a woman or I'm supposed to be a man, right? I personally, I can't talk about that really because I myself am not transgender. I will never be transgender. I don't even think of transgender people as true genders, right? If you're a man trying to be a woman, and again, I'm not trying to cause any hate. I'm not trying to argue with this or anything, right? This is my belief. You can argue with me to yourself or not. I don't really care. Um, but the main thing is, I don't believe that a man should be a woman or could be a woman, and I don't believe that a woman could be a man, right? Because of the body parts and everything like that. It doesn't matter how many surgeries you get. At the end of the day, you still have your biological chemicals within your body that make you you. And eventually changing, right? If you go from man to woman, let's say, you're changing yourself in ways that people don't really think of, you know? Like, what I mean by that is when people go through, the psychosis of not knowing who they are, and then they switch genders, that's not you anymore. You're a whole entire different person. And then they say that that is them. And I don't understand that. Because if I were to do the same thing, I still wouldn't know who I am. Or if I were to go from a man or a boy to a girl, then first off, I think that would mess with me a little bit. But it's like I would still be me deep down, but not. Like, since I'm changing myself, which I don't even know what that means, but since I'm changing myself, I'm no longer the current version of me. And the same could be said with just growing up in general. Like I said before, I think it was last video. No, it wasn't. But yeah, my dad has a lot of friends, and I'm like, how do you have friends with people who have grown like 50 years since you've met them? How does that make sense? You know? And I haven't ever asked him. I've never really given it much thought until like recently. But like if everyone's always changing even through time, then how do you know that you still will be friends with them? That's why I'm kind of afraid of, not getting into friendships or whatever, but I'm more or less afraid of people changing, of me changing. That's one of my biggest fears is being one day an old cranky man and having that feeling of psychosis all over again. That feeling of not knowing who I am, right? Because looking back at the 4-year-old me, I don't know who that is. That's 10 years ago, right? That's not me. I don't know my thought processes back then. Hell, I wasn't even really conscious, right? And then probably 10 years from now, 24-year-old me is going to look at 14-year-old me and he's going to be like, wow, I don't know who that is. And it's a very hard truth to try and swallow, like a very hard pill to swallow. But not knowing who you are just wrecks you mentally, if you really give it some thought. And there are some people out there that just don't give it thought. And I think those people need to think more about life. Because if you don't think about life, then that's just weird. I feel like you would live your life every single day not questioning why you're a conscious human being or why you're even here. And I think that's a little bit weird, just not giving anything any questions. But the point is, I don't know who I am. And to think that I will never know who I am scares me. It's a lot less bad as it was back then, when I was like 13, when I was like going through that depression, when I was contemplating everything. It gave me time to think when I was bedrotting. It gave me time to think about life, to think about who I am. And I think I am not my name, nor am I my ideas, nor am I any other visual or thought processed version of me, right? If I were to have one of my friends say, "Who am I?" they'd give me their insight of who I am in their eyes. And although that would be true for them, that isn't true overall, right? I'm not me, you know? And I think that you who's watching this video and me are both ideas of our own ideas, if that makes sense. Like, I am not my name, however, I am the idea. I am the thought of Fowlin, right? Which is my name, because I have to kind of give myself a name to, you know, give myself some relativity, right? But the point is, we are all ideas of our own self, and that is who we are. That's what I've kind of came to a conclusion of, because I can't find any other way of describing myself, others, anyone really, because I don't know who you are. I don't know who I am. I don't know anything. And that scares me. Like deeply. It deeply scares me. Not knowing who I am, not knowing who I will ever be, that's what's horrifying. And I think I've gone when I've gotten to that conclusion, it gave me a sense of a clear mind almost, you know, like a clear worksheet. And now that I'm no longer really contemplating who I am to the extent of how I was before, I'm peaceful. I'm at peace to a certain degree. And I don't know quite what that means, but I hope that you can also find yourself the way I have. Maybe from this video, maybe from my explanation. Maybe if it doesn't suit your explanation of who you think you are, I hope it at least helps, for people who have gone through or are going through the same struggles as I have. I think there's not much more I can say on this. Um, so yeah, if you enjoyed, I think I'm going to talk about. Ooh, I don't know what to talk about. So if you guys have any ideas, maybe comment down below. That would help greatly. I appreciate the support of my last video. If you haven't watched my last video, go check it out. I think it's a pretty good rundown of, parts of my life. But yeah, if you enjoyed, you can like if you want, you can subscribe if you want. It's all up to you. But I hope you enjoyed.